Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to Social Media Day 2022. And this is an exciting day here. I mean, I started doing stuff a few years back on Social Media Day and have really enjoyed it. It takes a little bit of break from my note investing and real estate investing stuff to kind of help share a little bit of the magic in how we've grown our audience. But I'm really excited to have experts on, and as people I call friends too, which is great, who will say yes to me, which is always a beautiful thing, but that love to come on and share their expertise, because I have learned just as much from them as maybe they've learned from me or seen what we do. And I always love sharing those lessons, those tips, those tools with you, with my audience, because I want you guys to succeed as well. And so I'm really excited. This was the first person that I reached out to. Is like, I got to get her on here. And sure enough, she's like, I'm getting ready to go on vacation. I'm going to Maui. And she was very graceful enough to come on and say yes to me. So we are honored to have the authority expert that experts use. She will help you amplify your audience. She's also the host of Amplify Your Audience podcast, but just an absolutely amazing person, an amazing professional out there. She helps expert-preneurs add $12K a month to their bottom line. So if that doesn't get you excited to pay attention to what this lady has to say, I don't know, you're in the wrong spot. But anyway, we are honored to have somebody who teaches people to stop being the best kept secret out there. My good friend, Melanie Benson. What is going on today, Melanie? How are you doing?
Well, it's an exciting day. I love social media. It's one of my favorite ways to stand out and connect with people. And, we've met each other in real life, but I think we've really built our connection via social media because we always give each other lots of love. And my podcast, Amplify Your Success, is one of those. It's one of those ways that we grow the reach and help people find it.
Yeah, you do. You're doing an amazing job. And we were just talking a few minutes before because there's so many things we could cover here on this aspect. But let's talk, because you've done an amazing job. And how has your kind of social media message evolved over time, or is there well, let's start first with that. How has that kind of evolved for you before I get to the next question I want to ask you?
Okay, well, remember, I'm OG. I've been doing this since 2000, way before social media even existed. I remember the day when somebody goes, "You need to get on Facebook." I go, "Face what?" Right. And then somebody said, "You need to get on Twitter." I'm like, "What? What do? You tweet?" I don't get it. So, I was looking for ways to stand out before social media existed. And I think two things that I feel really fortunate happened. First of all, that I did have people who kind of said, "Hey, you might want to step into this," from the very beginning. And it allowed me to create some momentum and traction that I think is a little bit harder to get these days. I have almost 20,000 followers on Twitter and a very engaged audience. And that's because I started when Twitter started.
Right.
So I think that the opportunity to start from the beginning has been very helpful. I am not a fast start person, so I'm not the one that usually jumps on trends, but social media is kind of low risk. So it was worth just saying yes and building a presence there. What has evolved? It's very interesting. I found that different different social media platforms, I have loved them or hated them or leveraged them or kind of ignored them at different times on my journey. And as I emerged with a podcast, I really started looking at how can I partner with my different platforms? How can I partner with my communities there? And how do we really want to customize our engagement and our how we build a presence for the podcast without starting over? Because I didn't want to create entirely new social media platforms for the podcast. And I also know that each social media platform has very different ways that the community engages. What we do on LinkedIn is really different than what I do on Twitter and what I do on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really been the evolution, is keeping the brand presence growing and really fine tuning as we go. How do we make the most out of being there?
I love it. Yeah. That's definitely a big thing. I think you and I both were okay, I'm not an expert in everything, but I like to dive in, start figuring things out. Everything's got to be a little bit different. You can't have the same strategy across each platform because they do each have its nuances. But I think also that scares a lot of people. Oh, I got to do something different every time I post to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. And that usually is the initial hurdle that stops a lot of people, right?
Yeah, and that is a conversation that happens a lot with my clients when I'm helping them expand the reach of their brand and they want to elevate their authority. They're like, okay, well, I don't want to be on every platform. It's actually not as hard as you think. I have a secret weapon that I use. Her name is Lindsay Phillips. So I know you know
Friend, she
Lindsay.
does a great job.
Yeah. So she does a lot of that for me, but I still construct the strategy. I still construct the presence and the way I want to connect there. But I think one of the things that is probably important to remember is to have at least 2, maybe 3 places that you are going to really focus, and then figure out like what's the bare minimum you can do to have like a presence. I have a client who I'm just bringing him on over the last few months, and we're really elevating his authority. So I helped him write a book, and then we're putting him on podcasts to get the book traction. And he's like, I have no social presence. What should I be doing? And I'm like, well, if you're going to get on other people's podcasts, you need to have some kind of brand presence. And what we did is we figured out his number one is LinkedIn. That's where his clients are. That's where he needs to be. And so we focused primarily on that platform for him. And then I'm like, now just kind of cross-purpose some of this and automate it across the different platforms. So just figure out, like I use a tool called Recur Post, which I love because I can take one piece of content and I can pick all the platforms I want it on. And right there, right in that moment, I can customize how it's going to be consumed on the different platforms. So it's showing up the way that platform likes to be connected with. So for Twitter, it's like 200 characters, whereas on LinkedIn, I'm writing more of a story, which on Instagram, I'm going to do something different, right? So it's all about like taking the content and figuring out how do we just cross-purpose the rest of it.
That's so true. And there's some great resources out there, I mean, Hootsuite and Buffer and Recur Post. That was how you.
Yeah, Recur Posts. I like them a lot.
Nice. We got to put that down in a suggestion in the tips for everybody at the end of the day, Recur Post. But that's the thing is, it's not as difficult as most people use. There's tools that may cost you a few bucks a month, but that few bucks a month really comes back exponentially when you're getting out in front of your audience, especially when you're promoting to the platforms that your clients are actually on, right?
Yeah.
Now, where do you find the biggest? First of all, why don't we do this? Why don't we define your audience, or let you define your audience, and then share which platform or two that you really love the most?
It's interesting. I was just having a conversation about this because my audience has really refined more and more and more over the years. And I know that my ideal audience, my ideal client is someone who they know they're an expert, but they feel a bit like a best kept secret, like you introduced me. And it's not because they don't have a successful business, they do, but they have probably been relying on referrals and outdated marketing strategies that aren't performing well for them right now. And they want to take their business and double or triple it, but they don't really know how to grow their brand reach. And so one of my specialty areas is teaching people how to leverage other people's podcasts and platforms, but we can do this in any way. So for that, honestly, like probably my best platform right now for attracting clients is my podcast. So that would be an extension of social media. But if we were going to pick one of the primary platforms, I have to say Twitter. It might blow people's minds. And I think so. LinkedIn, I have a very different experience. I'll share what I'm doing on LinkedIn in a minute. But Twitter, I have a very engaged community, and it might blow your mind how much media coverage I get from Twitter. How many people have been repeatedly seeing what I do and building this connection with us. And then when they're ready, they're like, hey, how do I get to know more about what you do? Okay, so Twitter is a very powerful platform for me. I get invited to a lot of like Twitter chats and Twitter spaces as an expert. It's one of my places that I guest speak. And those oftentimes turn into a great list building. And then, 1 or 2 people will either buy one of my resources or reach out and ask for a consultation.
Love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. But that takes time. Social media success does not happen overnight. And those that try to make that happen, with fake followers or fake subscribers, stuff like that, we know that doesn't last, right? There's no fast lane to social media success without really listening and communicating with your audience, right?
Yeah, and I actually pay attention on the different platforms. What does get engagement? And it sometimes surprises me, like what we do on Instagram. I look at Instagram more as like a brand reinforcement. And then it's interesting what does emerge there. I find that when I do like some kind of a what a friend of mine calls pattern interrupting content, where I get them to look at their patterns, that really works. Like I do believe like people find the podcast there a lot, but what really happens is like I'll take something that I've taught in a podcast in a solo episode and then break it down into an infographic and do like a comparison or like a top 5 things. Those are the ones that actually move the needle the most. So that's what works on Instagram. What works on LinkedIn is live streaming. My live streams, especially when I do them with, I have a friend that we do a show together called Next Level Influence. Those live streams are always getting people engaged and commenting and asking about it and sharing it. And so LinkedIn's working very differently. And as you know, I jumped on the LinkedIn newsletter pretty early. And that has once we started doing LinkedIn newsletter, that totally drove my podcast listenership up immensely.
Now, for those that are like a newsletter, I don't have anything that could be that interesting. I'm not that interesting. What are some tips that you would recommend, or some of the things that you're doing to fill your newsletter, fill the content?
Yeah.
Are you writing it fresh, or is it recycling and bringing in some of the different things you've got going on, or outside influences, or what?
Yeah, we're testing a couple different things actually to see. I've seen a couple different styles that work really well. What we're doing with mine is we take some of the insights from each week's podcast and we reframe it in the newsletter for LinkedIn and send it out. And people are like, oh my God, like I don't want to be spamming all my LinkedIn followers. It's not that way. Right. People are saying, I want to get the newsletter. You're not just sending it to all your LinkedIn followers. And so one of the beautiful things about the LinkedIn newsletter is it lands in your email inbox. So you don't have to wait till people go and, go check out their LinkedIn feed, and you're not disappearing in the feed. You're literally landing in their inbox, and it's permission. They said they wanted it. So there's not anybody saying, oh, you're spamming me. Like, no, you asked for it. Right. And I find that it's a great way to increase the conversation. Now, another friend of mine, he's doing something a little different where he's actually writing a thoughtful, like a tip and like unpacking one of his tips each time he sends a newsletter out. And he writes a really great newsletter. But I already do that in my main newsletter for my email list. So I didn't want to double duty. So that's what we do with the LinkedIn newsletter.
So it's a twist, but it's fresh material, not the same thing. And it's important to include it, make it something different and add more value to your message to your audience, is exactly what you just said.
Yeah. It's not always 100% fresh, but what we try to do is bring the quote in, spotlight something that I got out of it. So make it a little more conversational rather than just what they might read on the show page.
Very nice. Very nice. Now let's talk a little bit about podcast guesting, because you're really doing an amazing job. What are some of the things that you look at for your clients to see if they're a fit for that, or what's kind of the qualifications that you would have them work on?
Yeah. So, first of all, let me just back up and say that a lot of people, you and I have a podcast. We know how much goes into that. It can be a lot of time, money, and energy to put out a podcast, and not everybody's ready to make that investment in themselves yet. Right. What I have found is that if you're not ready for that, we can still leverage the growth of podcasts by being a guest on other people's podcasts. And I like to get my clients on either their competitors' podcasts, which, yes, they're still going to ask you to be on their podcast. It's still a good fit. Or like a colleague who serves your same audience, but maybe has a complimentary offer, because we already know there's a warm audience there, right? And what I find is that a lot of people are not acting on this opportunity to really elevate your authority and to be more visible in the minds and in the ears of your ideal clients. And like you're missing this extraordinary growth opportunity right now. Like what was it at the beginning of the year? There was 2 million plus active podcasts on Apple. Holy moly. We know like 60 to 70% of them are interviewing people. Okay.
Yep.
It's not just the true crime, conversations or the people who are, just doing solos or whatever. Like there is a significant number of those podcasts that are spotlighting guests each week. So that means they're hungry for content. They're hungry for other experts. So I have the unique opportunity to teach podcast guesting from the lens of somebody who has a top 1.5% podcast in the world. We have just been so blessed from our audience, giving us that lift. They're listening. It's driving the algorithms up. But what that means is, first of all, I know what my audience likes on my podcast. So I know what other hosts oftentimes look for. But secondly, with all that rise in visibility, you know what happens, Scott. I'm getting 100 pitches a week, if not more, of people who want to be on my show. And as I look at those pitches, I'm like, yeah, like they don't get it. Like they don't understand how to pitch me, the host, with the best possible chance of getting picked. I pick less than 1% of those pitches to get on my show. And the ones that I do, I feel very just like I'm blessed. Like these are just great guests. But what I find is they're missing one of the 5 key elements that causes somebody to stop the scroll, which is what I'm thinking about. Like, is somebody scrolling through their device and they're saying, all right, well, what am I going to listen to today? Like I'm looking at those pitches going, does that topic stand out? Does that have a compelling quality? Is it going to be magnetizing the listener to listen to the show? And these generic pitches, these topics that people have no idea, like, is this really going to be a good fit for my show? They're just blindly pitching because some PR agency or some, podcast pitch company, which I am grateful for you guys, but come on, you got to dial it in. They don't know.
You spend a little more time on the pitch versus just blankets.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shotgun approach does not work. You need to be sniper focused more than shotgun.
No, there's a whole thing, but I'm not going to get into that. But I know why they do it that way, but it's not effective. So yeah, I think what's really moving the needle right now is to dial in a topic that's compelling, that's magnetic. I teach something called the Rocks method, which is in my guest expert system that really teaches people how to title things. So it is stopping the scroll. It is getting you to stand out in the sea of pitches, and you're going to land those better podcasts. You're going to get your chance to share your message and inspire other people to learn more about you and buy your book or buy your program or work with you in some capacity.
Yeah, that's the thing is there are some different things that will get me to stop if it's relevant to my show versus the shotgun approach.
Boom, boom, boom. That's it.
Exactly. And they literally mention an episode or two that they've actually truly listened. Hey, I saw that you had this expert on. I thought this guy might be an expert, a great guest because you had that person. And it's not always the fit, but I'm like, okay, you've looked at least you've looked at my episode. You've scrolled through what my episode titles were, you know what I mean? To figure out if it's a fit. But it's so many people just, and it's such a valuable, so many people just shortchange this. And you and I both know that when somebody's listening to your podcast, it is really one of the most effective tools in the media asset. Besides social media, your listeners are really part of that audience. They're listening intently to what you're providing more so than really any other platform out there too. Right, Melanie?
Yeah, totally. There's a little tie-in too between social media and being a guest on other people's podcasts. Do we have a couple more minutes? I can share a little hot tip. Okay.
Yes, please.
So, I think one of the complaints that I hear from people who, where I'm talking to them about this strategy and they're like, okay, well, Melanie, like, I don't know if this is really going to work for me. I did a few of them and nothing ever happened. And I think what happens is, yes, if you've got a great host, you're going to get exposures to new audiences. That is a given. And you don't have to let the host do all the work. I've discovered that one of my secret sauces to pulling in new clients from each episode I'm featured on somebody else's podcast is what I do in my own social media. So I mentioned Twitter earlier. Part of what I found just was mind-blowing, eye-opening, I did it completely by accident, and then now I do it intentionally, was we would load up the guest spots I did into my Twitter feed and then set them up to reoccurringly drop in front of my audience. And you know what started happening was the third time, the 12th time, the 20th time I aired that episode, somebody would go, "Oh my gosh, Melanie, you're talking to me. Like, this is so a problem for me. Like, how do I work with you?" See, we make this assumption that all the good stuff is going to come from what that host brings us. And yes, that is part of the equation, but a bigger part is activating your dormant followers. It's re-engaging people who maybe been on your list or are kind of lurking around in your social world and they're not doing anything. Every time I share a hot episode, I get more speaking. I get people who are like, "Oh my God, I heard you talk about this on so-and-so's podcast. Can you come do a training for my event or my membership or whatever?" It is a hot opportunity generator, and you can create that buzz and momentum without having to wait for anyone else. It's like if you were going to be on TV, you would leverage the shit out of that, wouldn't you?
Yep.
You'd be like,
Amen
every platform.
Well, but that's the thing, is so many people think it one and done. That's so true with sales. I mean, the American Marketing Association says all the time that 80% of your sales is going to come after your fifth contact. And you mentioned something there about that third time, the fifth time, the 20th time that they see you, maybe they do click on. Maybe you hit a button that is much more emotional, or it hits that hot button that they're going for at that point versus what they looked at a month ago. And the recycling, and I hate to say it because I always think of trash recycling, but recycling the content it proves a point, because two other people that have podcasts, when they're looking to see if you would be a good guest and they go in there and see that you're sharing other people's shows that you're on, other opportunities, that leads you to a whole higher outlook, a higher standard in their eyes, right?
Yeah. And you're elevating your brand in the process. And I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of social media for reinforcing our brand, for reinforcing our message. Because what happened as we were getting ready for today, you went and looked at all my social media to look at what I have been talking about lately. 9 out of 10 times when somebody is evaluating me to come and speak at their event, or they're going and evaluating me as a VIP client and whether or not they're going to hire me, they're going to look at all my social media to see, is she real? Is she consistent? Does she have a presence that is congruent with her brand? And yeah, we may not always get clients from social media, but I guarantee you, if you have a podcast, it's going to help you elevate your brand for your podcast. It's going to keep drawing in new listeners, but even more importantly, you are showing the world that you are real, that you are powerful, and you are an expert in your field, and you're somebody that needs to get paid attention to.
Amen to that. Big applause for consistency, sticking to it and sharing the same message. So many people I kind of compare it to the whole, most entrepreneurs at some point have been part of some multi-level marketing aspect of things, or currently are. Nothing wrong with them, but a lot of them hop from one thing to another thing to another thing. And people, their audiences or their friends or their tribes are like, "I don't know what you're doing. You're selling this soap on a rope. You're selling vitamins. You're doing this protein thing, herbal, whatever it might be." You've got to be consistent with that one message, or that one kind of constant message of what your expertise or where your power lies, right?
Yeah, let's unpack that for a second, because you tapped on something that for 20 years I've been speaking on stages all over the world about, and it's the creativity. The unstructured creativity becomes bright, shiny object chasing. And usually that's a sign that what you're doing isn't working, or you're multi-passionate. We have a community of people who are neurodivergent, as it is now referred to, which is a very nice way of saying that your brain is multi-talented, multi-passionate, and you've got lots of interests. And when we left that unchecked, what ends up happening is you have a very confused brand. And I have literally evaluated people to speak on stages for me or be on my podcast. And I'm like, I don't know what you do. I have zero clarity about your superpower and how it translates in a way that would be interesting to my audience. And so, yes, you can have lots of passions, but there's a way to structure your brand and your brand message so it's cohesive, rather than feeling scattered and like you're doing a billion different things. And it really does impact the traction of of everything you do. So I'm really glad that came up today.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, what everybody, we had the great resignation here in the last 12 and 24 months, and people leaving their 9 to 5, their careers to go do something different or something that they're more passionate about, or instead of working for a company, they're going out and doing it on their own. What is some counsel, not advice, but counsel that you give new entrepreneurs out there when starting out and looking to build the brand? What are some mistakes that just drive you bonkers? Like, oh, it makes you cringe when you see people making mistakes.
Well, it's a very interesting stage in those first couple years. And I remember in my first couple years, I did everything wrong. Like I was selling business coaching. Like nobody's hiring a business coach. Like they want a result. And I think the first mistake we often make is we don't really understand the full value of what we do. And so we lean on the features. We lean on the process we do instead of knowing how to create a compelling magnetic message that draws people in. And so I think that's probably the number one mistake. And then the second one is, and I've worked with some newer business owners over the years, and they always fight me on this, is they try to solve all the problems for all the people. Mm-hmm. Look, all the people are not going to hire you. There is a certain section of people. There is a very honed in niche that is a sweet spot for you. And if you can learn what that is, and then really understand what is going to move them to want to hire you, to buy your product, and then develop the messaging that they probably don't even know they want to hear, but that stops them in the scroll through social media and gets them to lean in and say, oh my gosh, he's talking to me. Oh my gosh, she just totally nailed what I'm doing wrong or what my struggle is right now. And we can do that from our podcast. We can then pull those sound bites out and develop content, repurpose that content over and over and over again in social media. And that is what gets people to move. So don't be everything to everybody. Don't try to be on every podcast. Don't try to attract all the people on social media. Figure out who your people are. And then third is, and I don't want to say everybody does this, but I know it's a significant amount, is you wait way too long to hire a coach and hire support, and you struggle for years with a problem that could be solved in an hour because you're trying to save money. And I know many of us bootstrap. I know many people are trying to squeeze it together. But look, like, be willing to invest now to grow faster, because there are people who deeply and desperately need what you have to do. And if you're struggling with stuff, invest a little bit of money to get where you want to go faster, so you can serve more people and you can make more money faster.
No truer words were ever stated out there. That's the so truth. You look at all the experts and professionals out there, the people at the top of the game, they've all struggled, but they also, most, I won't say most, all of them have some sort of coach that's gotten them through some sort of low spot or help them go from 0 to 60 to 600 really quickly. Because as they often say, we as entrepreneurs, we want to grow into 100 grand in income. We got to have 100 grand mindset. But if you want to go from 100 grand to 7 figures, you've got to change that mindset and hang out with a different group of individuals, or have somebody hold your hand through that process, right?
Yeah. Well, the decision-making changes every new level of success. Like who you are in the beginning and the way you think and the way you make decisions is very different than when you hit that first 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, 7 figures. It all changes. And so if you're still having the conversation and you're thinking about your business the way you did when you started, you'll never hit those higher levels, because it is dramatically different at each new level. And we have to show up differently. Who we want to surround ourselves need to be different. Because I like to think of it as like there's a magnet that starts pulling you instead of you pushing like a boulder uphill. Mm-hmm. And that happens when you're in the conversations, you're listening to the podcast, you're joining the masterminds, you're working with coaches, your social media feed is full of people that lift you up instead of make you feel like crap when you scroll through your feed, right? Like,
right. Well, that's the thing too. Yeah. And I think we all deal with that at some point. We have our tribe, and many people want everybody to love us. We all we got to have everybody love us. And like you said, not everybody is your client. There are some people that aren't going to like you no matter what you do. They have a dark hole for a soul. You know what I mean? They don't like you because of your skin, your sex, your race, what you say, what you wear, what you wear, whatever. They're just not happy. And we all have trolls in our lives. And you just have to say, as we say in Texas, bless your heart and move on from it in a lot of cases, right?
Yes. It's funny you bring that up because I think a lot of people, that is a fear that they have, this fear of being seen in a way that they're going to get attacked. The Australians call it the tall poppy syndrome. Mm-hmm. I would like to encourage you to reach for that, and to develop the muscles and the tools to navigate the trolls. Like, they're like pestilence, right? It's like, they are operating out of pain and they're operating out of fear, and you're representing something to them that they can't achieve and won't achieve because the way they focus in their world. And I say, if you navigate as if you're going to get trolls, as if you're going to have people challenge you, as if people are going to have a problem with you and you expect it, then you're probably going to be like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like I've skated through relatively easily. Like I've had some people I've had problems with, and there's been a couple of Facebook throwdowns, but overall, like I feel like I've kind of navigated through the waters pretty well. And again, it all comes back to mindset.
Yep.
Like when you are doing something great, when you are being true and authentic to you and your work in the world, not everybody's going to love it. Like not everybody's your cup of tea. And so focus on attracting the people that need to hear what you're doing, of that like-minded community, and just let go of everybody else. Like don't make what they say matter, or block.
Or realize that you'll never have somebody who's doing more than you actually say bad about you. Most of the time, it's always going to be somebody who's not, like you said, wants to be where you're at, but they don't have the cojones, don't have the skill, or the fears scare them or limit them from taking the action out there. So that's great counsel there, because it's happened. Today's world of chaos and everything going on. Yeah.
Isn't there a Brene Brown quote about that? Never take advice for someone who's not willing to get in the ring and do what you're doing. It's such a great quote. I'm totally bastardizing the quote, but now we're gonna have to look it up and throw it in there. But
there's another quote I was watching about being a good boxer. Being a good boxer is just not about throwing punches and scoring. It's about being able to absorb blows as well too. Absorb the punches, the jabs, and be able to absorb those or get up off the mat when you do get knocked down.
I just got chills, Scott. It's so true. Man, I've definitely taken blows. If not from anybody else, from my own, not knowing what to do. It's like, it's perseverance. It's every day plugging back into that greater why and saying, I'm going to show up today. There are people that need to hear what I have to say, and social media, my podcast, my e-zine, whatever it is that you're doing, those are the vehicles in which you get to show up and make a greater impact and attract those clients who are desperately looking for a solution, or maybe not desperate, but know that something needs to change. And your message could be the very thing that moves them over the line and gets them to expand their success today.
Well, that's the thing. I think more people are looking for solutions. They're looking for changes. They're looking for things to help them have that bottom line or be more about themselves. Because I think people realize that if they want to accomplish their dreams and goals, nobody else is going to do it for them. No career, no 40 hours a week, 40 years is going to do that. They've got to take the leap, get outside of that false evidence appearing real fear mindset, and realize, hey, once you do it, it's not so bad. It's a whole lot easier than what I expected it to be. And surround yourself with like-minded people. That's how we met, was at a mastermind of folks, of experts that had different superpowers that we all kind of learned from. It's kind of like we're all like if you're a Marvel character, X-Men Rogue, you get to absorb a little bit of everybody's superpower if you hang around them long enough, right?
Yeah. And also you're tapping into possibility where maybe you saw limit before. You're tapping into new thinking and like that co-creative energy that only happens when you're with like-minded people who are doing it differently, but we all have the same goal. Super. It's so compelling and exciting. I love it.
I love it.
I miss it too.
I do too. I know. I was talking with our buddy Adam Schreibel, who'll be on later. talking about the community of that, and marketers are really a great community because everybody realizes there's no competition. It's us competing against ourselves more so than anything else. It's all about what you're able to go out, hunt and kill, or find your own, or help you market yourself, versus a lot of other industries, which are very hyper competitive and cutthroat in a lot of cases out there. So that's the beauty of walking into a spot and being like, I found my tribe, versus, am I going to get stabbed in the back when you walk? You got to have your head in the swivel in a lot of cases, you know? What's one big thing for the, as this is really the halfway point of 2022, Social Media Day 2022 here, is what's something that you have as a goal or something you're looking to dive into to help you spread your audience or spread the word on what you're doing in the next 6 months of the year?
I'm glad you asked. Well, first of all, one of my secret goals, but it won't be so secret anymore because I'm saying it out loud.
And it makes it come true now. Come on now.
But, we've been hovering around 1.5% of podcasts worldwide. And I have a goal to move it to 1% before the year ends, because yes, there's a little bit of vanity in there, but also like that means we are reaching more people. We're inspiring more people in the world, and it's also great for my guests. So it's a win-win-win. So that's one of my secret goals, not so secret anymore. And my other goal that has been kind of on the back burner for a little while, and I'm looking at how do I kind of recalibrate some of my stuff to make room for this, but I am writing a book on what I call collaboration currency.
Nice.
I find that collaboration and what we were talking about a minute ago, like the energy that sparks when we're with like-minded people who, we're part of a community of abundance. And even if we do some similar things, we want to co-create opportunity, just like what you're doing right here. You are co-creating opportunity. There is so much abundance that comes from this. And I think there is a paradigm of people who lock into competition where collaboration could be present, or they're really more committed to doing it alone. And so they never really get out of the starting gate. Or as another friend of mine and I joke around about, they're more shark oriented. So they're always like, what's in it for me? And like, how is this going to like serve me? And there's not that collaborative spirit. And they're more taker than co-creation. And so I want to change the paradigm of what's possible when we collaborate and when we create opportunity for all of us, right? Like we're entering some very unique times in our world. And a lot of people are in fear, and a lot of people see limit, and a lot of people see everything shrinking. When we collaborate, nothing shrinks. Everything just keeps growing. It might change. It might look different, but but the opportunity is there.
There's a term that we use in the note business called co-opetition.
Yeah.
Cooperation and competition works together. It really breeds a lot of this. So I love your book. When you get it done, you got to let me know, because we will help promote the hell out of it. Because,
thanks.
Glad to do that out there, because that's what we need. I mean, that's one of the great things that brings us together. Social media is got some great tools of bringing the world together, making it a much smaller spot, but it's also, you got to use it right. And you got to be able to engage and use it on a regular basis. And you were just doing an absolute amazing job with your message and your audience, Melanie.
Thank you. That means a lot to me, and I love when I get to connect with people all over the world and help create insight, inspiration, whatever it is. So thank you for inviting me into this space today. And let's celebrate social media. It brings us together in a positive way.
It sure does. What is the best way for those that are watching or listening to this for you, whether they're catching this live here or watching the replay? What's the best way for folks to see more of what you're doing or connect with you?
Yeah, well, of course, any of my social media platforms, Coach Melanie Benson on most of them, Mel Coach on Twitter. I also have a resource that I think would be very helpful for this audience in particular. I mentioned a couple different times how I like to leverage other people's podcasts, other people's platforms. And I've got a 7-step process that I've been using for 18 years. Before it was live stages. Now it's really podcasts and virtual stages. And it's what helps me attract in $12,000, $15,000, $25,000, $30,000 in new business. That's on top of what I normally do. I call it my 7-step framework to leverage other people's podcasts to attract $125,000 a year or more into your business. And you can find that at amplifywithmelanie.com. And what it does is it kind of walks you through how to take all the pieces from clarity of what your offer is, how to like get on those stages, what you're going to talk about, and pulls it together and shows you like, what's the roadmap need to look like? So if you are out there, trying to attract new people, attract new leads, and looking for collaboration opportunities, this gives you a little bit of a structure and a process to follow that works for me and it works for my clients.
I love it. Check that out. What's the URL again?
Amplifywithmelanie.com.
Nice. We'll have that below in the in the chat roll, but also in the actual description of the video if you go back and watch the replay and stuff like that for you. But yeah, check it out. It is great. Melanie knows her stuff. She is an expert. And like I said, if you're nervous or worried and wanting to get your message, like so many people out there, the best thing you can do is pick up a phone, jump online and check her out and ask her to help you out there, because that's what we all want. We all need somebody to guide our hand and sometimes give us a good kick in the butt or pull us out of the funk that we're in and help us identify our powers and how we can leverage that to make more money and leave a bigger impact on the world. And that's what we need today, bigger impacts, right, Melanie?
Yeah, absolutely. We have something that people need and want, and we have people that are struggling. So let's match up and do what we were born to do.
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much for coming on Social Media Day 2022. Enjoy that Hawaiian vacation. Plenty of photos, plenty of Mai Tais, maybe a grass skirt or two involved in having a hula, huh?
Might throw a margarita in, you never know.
There you go.
And a snorkel.
But
not at the same time.
Well, that might, you know what? I saw
that's a whole nother party.
That's a whole nother party. Exactly like that. So, well, anyway, thanks again, Melanie, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I look forward to connecting with you all.
We'll see you later.